I'm here to try to debunk some of the myths and misconceptions of participation in clinical trials in pulmonary hypertension. At the conclusion of this video, we hope that you'll be able to navigate both the benefits and the risks of participating in clinical trials research in pulmonary hypertension. We want you to understand the truth behind some common misconceptions regarding participation in clinical research, and we want you to be empowered to consider volunteering and encouraging others to volunteer to participate in clinical research. Now, importantly, there are multiple types of research. At the bench, there's basic science research or phase 0 research, which is preclinical. This is designed for us as scientists and researchers to better understand the mechanisms of disease, but also to identify new potential therapies. Then there's translational research. This is really the interface between basic science research and clinical medicine, often again trying to understand better mechanisms of disease or potential mechanisms for therapies, and it involves patient samples. Finally, there's clinical research, and this comes in two major flavors. So in terms of clinical research, there are two major types. The first is observational. This is the simplest type of clinical research. It's often called a natural history trial. This is when your doctors and researchers ask you to participate in a registry where they simply look at some of the features of you as a patient in terms of demographics and your disease and try to understand what happens to you. There's no interventions in this trial and no new medications. The second is an interventional trial, and this is what most of us think of as clinical trials. This is when the researchers and physicians are trying to address whether a medication or a procedure could benefit a specific disease. These come in different phases, but in fact, what the tests are going to do is ask whether a new medication or procedure is beneficial, meaning it has efficacy, or it has side effects. And these come in different phases based on what questions the investigators are addressing at the time. So what are some of the benefits and risks of participating in clinical trials? One of the important benefits, especially for a rare disease like pulmonary hypertension, is that participation in clinical trials is critical for us to advance the knowledge of this disease. This is both important for us to understand why patients develop disease, how best to diagnose disease, critically, how new therapies may improve patients who currently have disease, and how to best treat patients in the future. Without clinical research, we would not be able to improve our understanding of this disease or other human diseases. One of the benefits is that patients will have early access to new tests or treatments. And an additional benefit may be that you will have increased contact with your healthcare providers. Now, in addition to these benefits, there are some potential risks. And just like having access to new treatments and therapies may be viewed as a benefit, it could also incur some additional risks. These medications or treatments may have adverse events and side effects that are followed during your study participation. Participation in a clinical trial is clearly a significant time investment. And finally, there's always the possibility that the new treatment or test will be ineffective or could even cause harm. There are certain myths that we've heard when patients participate or are considering participation in clinical trials. One myth is that when they agree to participate in a clinical trial, they view this as a binding contract. It's important to note that when patients participate, they are completely volunteering, and therefore they can choose to revoke their consent at any time. It is our responsibility as researchers to fully ensure that participants fully understand this prior to enrollment. In addition, just like you have the choice not to participate in a clinical trial, if you choose to, you can withdraw your consent at any time. Therefore, you are not committing to staying into the trial if there is reasons that you feel that you need to withdraw. Again, participation in clinical trials is completely voluntary. Additional myth is that patients with pulmonary hypertension will put themselves at risk of not receiving treatment if they enroll in a clinical trial. In pulmonary hypertension, any study treatment will be given in addition to what you're currently being treated with. Patients will not be taken off effective treatments to enroll in clinical trials. Most study designs are trying to test whether a new drug or intervention has a positive effect. This is called efficacy. To do this, patients are often randomized to either receive the new drug or placebo. If at the end of the trial, the new drug or procedure has been shown to be beneficial, then frequently patients are allowed to receive the new drug at the end of the trial's conclusion. Now, importantly, there's an additional myth that participating in clinical trials is unsafe. It's noteworthy that before a clinical trial is undertaken in pulmonary hypertension patients, there are numerous safety procedures in place beforehand. First, trials include preclinical animal studies and studies in healthy subjects to ensure that there is minimal risk. Further, these study procedures are reviewed by institutional review boards. During a clinical trial, pharmaceutical companies are required to have a safety monitoring board. They have the authority to stop a trial at any time if they feel that it becomes unsafe, or if they feel that it has demonstrated that it is not useful. Even with all these safety measures in place, participants may experience adverse effects. Therefore, when you participate in a clinical trial, it is critical that you let the staff and your doctors know if you have any change in your symptoms during the trial. An additional myth is that participating in a clinical trial is a way to get free treatment. Generally, any additional treatments and visits specifically related to the study will not be charged to you and are part of the study itself. Any reimbursements given to the participants cannot be enough to persuade them to be involved in the study. And again, when you consent to participate in the trial, the researching staff should explain this all to you in entirety. A final myth is that if you participate in a clinical trial, you would have the risk of losing any benefits that you may receive. It's noteworthy that in October 2015, a permanent law entitled Ensuring Access to Clinical Trials Act, or EACT, became law. This allows individuals with rare diseases to participate in clinical trials and receive compensation without those funds counting against their income eligibility for Medicare and supplemental Social Security income. Now, I hope we've debunked some of the myths and misconceptions about participation in clinical research and walked you through information on the benefits and the risks of participation. We want you, the patient, to feel empowered to volunteer and to consider encouraging others in the community to volunteer in clinical research. So, before you see your pulmonary hypertension team, consider looking up some of the trials and jotting down some questions about how you can get more involved. Our next video will discuss the process of getting involved and the resources to find out more about available trials in pulmonary hypertension.